Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today I am filming my December wrap up. This month I read a total of 10 books, which was one of my better reading months, but admittedly I was very much pushed by trying to meet that elusive Goodreads goal of 75 books, which I did meet on the last day of the year. So I did achieve my goal, which was good, but it was a real push this month. But I had some time off work, so I did get to read a few more books than I have been throughout the year. So we'll go through today my thoughts on what I read in December. One of the books that I started reading in November but didn't finish till December was Everything But the Truth by Gillian McAllister. In this book we have couple Rachel and Jack, and Rachel stumbles upon an email in the middle of the night that sounds quite suspicious and seems to suggest that Jack is hiding something from her, and it puts it to doubt their sort of fledgling relationship. Although they have not been together very long, she's expecting his child, and it just makes her doubt everything about him. And then it's basically her trying to dig a little deeper, find out more, find out what's going on kind of thing, and she just uncovers this whole big mess of stuff that she was not expecting. This book was pretty good. I listened to it as an audiobook and I rated it 3 stars. It was one of those things, I enjoyed the book overall. The plot rounded out really nicely. Like I say, she's trying to figure out more about this guy that she's expecting a child with, and if she can actually trust him, and if there's a big secret, well, the big secret from his past that he's hiding from her. So like that all was very good. I did enjoy her trying to figure out more about him and stuff. That was really good. And then there was also another aspect of Rachel had stuff going on from her past. We had some flashbacks for her dealing with something really impactful in her life. And yeah, I did enjoy the book. If anything, I felt it was too long and it was going into some details that I just felt weren't really that necessary. I just felt like things could be a bit more concise with the delivery. The characters weren't the most likable to me. Like I said, I listened to it as an audiobook. So the character of Jack had a Scottish accent, and it kind of, I found it really annoying, which as a Scottish person, I don't know, if there's something doesn't sound quite right with an accent, especially a Scottish accent, it just kind of, I found it quite annoying. So that was a bit off-putting. I didn't find Rachel or Jack particularly likeable. Jack to me felt, well, obviously he was quite secretive, but he was also just a bit, I don't know, he was, he was a hypochondriac, he was quite paranoid, understandable considering, he had a big deep dark secret, but as a person, even at his best, as a person, I just didn't really warm to him that much. And Rachel, I don't know, she wasn't really my type of person either. As a character, I didn't warm to her very much. There was a lot of her thinking about stuff. There was a lot of her thinking over things, and that kind of dragged a little bit. Overall, all the bits were in the right places. It was really good, but I just felt like it because it took so long to get through, it lost its punch a little bit. But I did enjoy. It was interesting, kind of an exploration into, people and what they can do when driven to it, kind of a thing. So that all was very interesting aspects. I would recommend. I think it is a good book. It just wasn't like the punchiest of books, if that makes sense. We're not sticking to the order I've read these books. We're kind of just going with whatever I fancy talking about. So the last book I read in 2020 was Thoroughly Whipped by Tilly Cole, and this is a standalone romantic comedy about Faith Parisi and her boss Harry Sinclair. So Harry and Faith have kind of known each other for a little while, but they don't get on. He's more reserved and cold and business mind, and she's kind of a walking catastrophe. She's super clumsy, she's got a gob on her like you wouldn't believe, like the stuff that comes out of her mouth is just hilarious. They're very different people, so they just rub each other up the wrong way, basically. So Faith is a journalist. She works for a magazine. She does the sex advice column. It's called Ask Miss Bliss. And her advice is insane. It's so funny. Totally crude. But yeah, absolutely hilarious. I was expecting this book to be hilarious, and it was. I gave this a 4 star. I was really hoping it would be a 5. And I originally rated it as 5 on Goodreads. But I had to think about it and was like, actually, no, I don't think it's quite a 5. Maybe I'm just being really, really picky because I really enjoyed this book and flew through it. But there was just something maybe missing for it to be a 5. I adored Faith and Harry. I thought they were so good. The side characters of Faith's friends, Amelia, Nova and Sage, they were so funny. They were a great bunch of friends, supportive but like kind of questioning, and they were great. I loved them. I must admit, my favourite side character, it has to be Faith's mother. Faith's mother is absolutely hilarious. She's like Faith but worse somehow. Like, she would just say stuff that was completely inappropriate, and yeah, Faith's mother was fantastic. I can totally see where, like, she obviously was a blend of her mother and father, if that makes sense, and her mum had the kind of crude tongue and crazy sense of humour, and yeah, she was hilarious. I adored her. I would read a book just about her. She was brilliant. I loved that there was like a strong family tie element in here. She loved her parents. That was like such a nice heartwarming thing. There was a bit of, you know, coming together from two different worlds kind of thing. Obviously it's a romance, you know, there was a coming together of two different worlds kind of in here, but it resolved nicely. It was all nice, you know. Obviously the kind of crux of this book is that she, as part of her work, she has a bit of a foray into a sex club in Manhattan, because she wants to write a feature on it. So yeah, so she basically gets invited to be a siren at this sex club and goes in to kind of get a bit of an insight on, you know, this super secretive club called Knox, which I kind of expected a bit more from the Knox aspect. Obviously there was, you know, a lot of, the first half of the book, there was more of her kind of going into Knox and kind of, you know, becoming part of that scene. And I think I was expecting a bit more from that aspect. It was definitely more of a light foray into that kind of aspect, and I was expecting a little bit more from it. There was kind of a mystery aspect in there, but it was super obvious, even when they tried to kind of like stir it the other way for a little while. And there was like there was a red herring, and there was a part of me that was like, oh, the red herring aspect might have actually been really interesting if that was the way that it happened. But it, like I say, it was obvious. I'm not bothered about that. It was really, really nice. I loved, like, everything, the way it ended, it all wrapped up in a lovely happy ever after kind of way, which is what you want from a romance. I think maybe the first half of the book was stronger. Once we got into, you know, the actual relationshipy part, things wrapped up so like kind of cutesy with a bow. And I think, I don't know, I think if the book had maybe been like a smidgen longer and just deepened that aspect just a little bit, I think the ending just felt a little bit too light and fluffy. It could have just been a little bit more to it. It wrapped up a bit quickly for me. But, I mean, it wasn't a long book. I think it was like 260 pages. If it had maybe been like 360 or something, just fleshed out that little end of the book a bit more, it probably would have been a 5. But, really good read. Love it. So funny. Now, obviously, triggers for this book, it's very highly sexual, and it's got some BDSM in there. It's got all that kind of stuff. If you're not into graphic sex scenes, don't go near this book, because it's not going to be for you. But if you find that kind of thing kind of interesting, or it doesn't bother you at all, like, the humor in this book's great, the characters are great, highly enjoyed. So I'm glad I finally read this one. I think there's only one book of Tilly Cole's I've not read yet, of her past releases. Obviously she's got more coming out in 2021. I think there's still a book of hers I haven't read yet, so I need to have a wee look into that. I'll check with my friend who got me onto Tilly Cole. I'm sure there's one that I've not read yet, but everything I've read of hers is just fantastic. So highly recommend the author and the book. Hilarious, as expected. The next book I read in December was by Matt Haig, and it was Reasons to Stay Alive. This was Matt Haig is an author. He's written books, I think it's like The Humans, The Midnight Library, there's a few others. He's a very well respected author, but he himself has had lots of struggles with mental health in the past, and this is his kind of take on, you know, almost like having conversations with yourself, dealing with that side of his past. He went into quite a dark depression for a while. And it's kind of him dealing with it and sort of giving some tips on how others to deal with it. It was a good book. I really enjoyed. As far as those kinds of books go, it's not the one that I would have said was the most powerful to me. It didn't speak to me as much as some other books that I've read on the topic, but really good. It was well written, and I'm looking forward to reading more of his other works, his fiction works, after reading this book. So I think I rated this one a 3-star. Solid book, but just didn't stand out to me as one of the best in that genre, but really good book overall. Sticking with non-fiction, I read Why We Eat Too Much by Dr. Andrew Jenkinson. So this book is about kind of people's relationship with food and why we eat and why we can overeat. It goes into the science of sort of dieting and why dieting often doesn't really work, and why you can you lose a lot of weight on a diet and then you end up gaining it back and gaining more. And he goes deep into the science of why he thinks that's the case. And it all really made a lot of sense to me. I've definitely been someone who's dieted on and off over the years, and lost weight really quickly, gained it back, gained a little more. It was basically everything that I've done in the past. I've not done any of the fad diets like cabbage soup and no carbs and stuff like that. It's more been calorie restriction methods I've gone with. But he basically went into all those sorts of different diets and said why, like the good parts and the bad parts about them, why they didn't really work. He has a bit at the end of what he recommends for, you know, healthy nutrition and things like that, which is fine. But yeah, the general kind of gist of the book was basically your body essentially wants to stay in homeostasis. It wants to stay as it is. So if you go into a regime that tries to alter the way your body is, even if it's an incorrect thing, even if you're overweight, medically overweight, and you try and correct down to like, you know, what would be a healthy weight for your height and whatever like that, your body's like, no, I want to stay like this because we're used to this. So you restrict your calories, you lose the weight, but then you're fighting that battle to keep the weight off because your body's trying to return back to what it was, because it's like, well, no, that's what we're meant to be. You've deviated from what we've meant to be. And that was kind of the overall view. And that was why he was saying that it works more when you do gradual changes over longer periods of time, because your body doesn't try and fix it back to the way you were, which makes total sense. And obviously people who go on more gradual changes for longer periods of time do see results that last. That is, you know, well known. And he just had a really good way of explaining the science behind it, basically. I found it really interesting. It's a 4-star from me for this one. I found the bits that I read and enjoyed very good. The first section was very much about the science behind sort of weight gain and things like that. And the last section was kind of more about the fad diets and what he recommends. There was a section in the middle that was very science heavy about kind of like, you know, hormones and endocrine changes and all these things, which was good, factually good. I must admit I skimmed that part a little bit because I didn't really want to go that deep into it. But overall, very sound. I really enjoyed it, actually. I think people struggling with their weight or how they're feeling about their weight would maybe find this quite interesting. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a good read. Like I say, I did skim that a little bit in the middle, but overall, I found it quite informative. So another book I read in December was Our Little Cruelties by Liz Nugent, and this book follows 3 brothers. I'm struggling to remember their names. Will, Brian, and Luke. These are 3 brothers. It was set in Ireland, and so these are the 3 brothers in the book. And yeah, this book was not what I expected, but I surprisingly really enjoyed it. Like, you know, going into the book that one of the brothers has died, and you know that one of the brothers was somehow responsible for that event. And then you go through their lives. So the first third of the book is written by the eldest brother. The second portion of the book is written from the perspective of the youngest brother, and then it ends with the middle brother having his bit. And basically, in those sort of sections, you relive the same events each time, but from the perspective of the brother, of the brother that is narrating the chapter. So you can read one of the chapters and think, oh my god, he did that? That was really crappy of him. No wonder everyone feels that way. And then you can read it from his perspective and be like, oh, okay, that's not how it came across when you were reading it from the other brother section, but that's what led up to that point. So it was really, really interesting. I don't normally like books with that kind of setup, but I really, really liked it. And obviously the end point was to find out, you know, who died and who was responsible. And to be honest, I enjoyed the rest of the book so much, I almost didn't really even care about that part. I kind of had suspicions that were vaguely right. But like I say, that part kind of just felt like a bit of a bonus section for me. I just actually enjoyed reading the life from each brother because it made it so well-rounded and made you have a really good understanding of all the characters and their relationships. It was really, really interesting. Characters are horrible. Let's just get that out there. This is a good example of how you can really enjoy a book, but you can hate the characters. The three brothers were not nice people. The youngest brother was very, very troubled, but I would say the nicest of the three. But man, was that poor kid messed up. The eldest brother was vile, and the middle brother was just, he was opportunistic. He had a chip on his shoulder. He wasn't, you know, everything he did was trying to serve himself, and he kind of felt he was owed for everything in life. You know, when you get to know their parents, you can very much see where these poor qualities came from. Overall, a really good read. I gave this one 4 stars and I would highly recommend. I'm not surprised that I enjoyed the book because I love Liz Nugent's writing, but the setup of the book is not normally my cup of tea, but I really, really enjoyed. And it had a total sick twist at the end and you were like, ah, my God. So yeah, it was really, really, really good and I highly recommend this. So another author that I had really enjoyed reading books from in the past was Liane Moriarty, and if you saw my December TBR, I can link it up above. I plan to read 2 of her books this month, but I only actually ended up reading 1. So the one I read was Truly Madly Guilty, and I gave this a 3 stars. Kind of a similar setup in the fact that we know that there was an event. Basically, it was set up around a barbecue with sort of 3 couples and their children, and we know something bad happened at this barbecue that kind of changed their lives forever. We don't know what the event was, and you kind of go from their different perspectives leading up to that day and bits after the day, and you kind of find out what happened kind of later on in the book. So very similar to the previous book, but this one did not have the same punch. So kind of what happened, you kind of had a suspicion about what happened fairly quickly. That's not problematic to me at all, because I think the book was more to do with the friends and the relationships between them and how it changed because of that event and things like that. This one just, it was kind of boring. It took me a while to get through. It was far too long. I did not like the characters. Again, same as the last book, but I wasn't compelled by the characters. The last book, I didn't like anyone, but I was compelled to figure out why they were doing what they were doing and why they were thinking that way. Main characters, Clementine and Erica, have been friends for a very long time, but that's quite a complicated friendship. They're very different people. I found Erica quite annoying, but at the same time, I related to her a bit more. Clementine was just airy-fairy and up in the air. I don't know if it's because, like, her character is a cellist, she's a musician, very arty-farty, but she was just selfish, and I don't know, I didn't like her at all. I just kind of thought, I just didn't find her an appealing person. She was aggravating. This one, like I say, it just didn't pack the same punch. The structure was good, you know, it all came together well in the end. There was a really sad part in it that I was just like, oh my God, like, it was kind of good in the same sense as the last book, showing things from a different perspective, which I did enjoy. You know, there was like a grumpy old neighbour which everyone hated, and you were like, oh my God, he is so foul, and then you got a little bit from him and you were like, oh, I feel kind of sad for him now. So I like seeing different events from this, like the same event from different characters. I really enjoy that. But yeah, I just was a bit underwhelmed by this one, to be honest. I found the characters really annoying and it just didn't pack a punch. So like I say, I gave this one 3 stars. I did enjoy it, but off the back of it, I decided not to read the other book by Liane Moriarty that I had on my TBR. I had it from my library, so I just put that one back. I feel like I enjoy her stuff, but it's not fantastic, and I don't want to keep reading books that I just think are a bit meh. and that one, I say, it was just so middle of the road. I wasn't really that fussed about it, so I decided to alter my TBR and just stick with that one. Overall, it was fine, but a bit average for me, this one. One of the books that I read this month and hated was The Middle Finger Project by Ash Amberjay. Now this has a longer title, Trash Your Imposter Syndrome and Live the Unfuckwithable Life That You Deserve. So this is basically written by Ash Amberjay, who runs the Middle Finger Project. I kind of expected it to be kind of like a sassy, self-helpy kind of thing, be a bit inspiring, you know, do you want, live the way you want, all that stuff. I was expecting all that. What I was not expecting was the almost visceral hatred of this author. She was so annoying. I started reading it and thinking, okay, this will probably be a 3. And I carried on reading it and I was like, oh, it's a 2 because it's driving me nuts. I'm going to push through. And then I was like, nah, I hate it. I got to 80%. I hated it so much. I decided I'm going to finish here, give it a 1. Let's end this torture. She just talked a total load of bullshit. This made it onto my worst books of 2020 list. I hated it so much. I didn't like her attitude. I thought the advice she gave was dreadful. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm all for you go girl, you go do this, you know, live the way you want, don't let things hold you back kind of thing. But don't give rubbish advice and just say, well, take a risk and oh my god, this might happen. And it was drivel, utter drivel, didn't enjoy it. She was so flippant about everything, like her mum died and she kind of just made it out like it was this inconvenience to her to have to go and organise the funeral, and I was like, well, come on, like, no. And she never really straightened that out. I'm sure that was coming from grief and stuff, but I just felt like that just left a bad taste in my mouth, and I just felt like she was like anti the way the world works, and I don't know, I'm not saying the world works the right way, but I'm a more realistic person and I just kind of like to live within my means, my area. I'm not a big risk taker person, so I'm just not the right person for this book. I read it because of the mention of imposter syndrome, because I find that quite an interesting topic, but this book really wasn't about imposter syndrome. You know, she came from like a rougher upbringing and didn't have like privilege to help her along. That was fair. But it wasn't like imposter syndrome is, you know, that you can be really good at something and have this innate feeling that you don't belong, you're going to be found out, you can't do anything. And I actually briefly mentioned it and it wasn't what I was expecting. I didn't enjoy it. I wouldn't recommend it. I just think she gives terrible advice and wouldn't recommend anyone to read this book. Just don't. I listened to it as an audiobook and I just hated everything. The next book that I read that was slightly better was Body Language by A.K. Turner. So this was a book about a mortuary assistant, and she's doing her day-to-day job, and one of the bodies that comes through on the slab is someone that she knew. It was an old teacher of hers, and it looks like it's going to be put down to like natural causes, no suspicious death, and she's convinced there's more to it. Someone did this to her, so she wants to try and find out more about it. It's got the kind of, I don't know if it's like a supernatural element or something. She can kind of hear a little bit of thoughts from the bodies, nothing specific, but like, you know, like if they died in the cold or something, she would maybe hear them say, oh, they were cold. Or she just hears kind of a very small bit of thought from the bodies, and it makes her kind of look into certain parts of things differently, kind of a thing. So she can pinpoint things using that skill she has or something. So that was kind of interesting, although I didn't really think it was necessary. The character Cassie Raven, she is very much Abby from NCIS vibes, but weirder. I really liked Abby in NCIS, and I didn't really like Cassie that much, to be honest. As a character, I found her quite unlikable. She was basically kind of a messed up kid. She's flippant drug use, sleeping around, drinking. I struggle with that. You know, if this is like a person with a day-to-day job, I don't like the idea that they're doing their day-to-day job and then going out and snorting coke and getting drunk and then going to work the next day. I'm not a drug person. Like, don't get me wrong, I read books that have all that in it. One of the books that I have on this list by Maddie, you know, it's a motorcycle club. They're outlaws. They're in the drug trade. I'm not opposed to that kind of thing being in books, but like, I just don't like the idea of like an everyday average Joe going out and doing drugs and stuff. It makes me feel uneasy. I don't like it. This doesn't sit well with me. That's a personal thing. Maybe that wouldn't bother other people, but that bothered me and stopped me liking this character. So yeah, just my own personal feelings. There was another character in A Policewoman, and she was kind of the opposite. I want to say her name was Phillida, but I can't remember her last name. And she was very much super into the rules, no bendy rules kind of thing. Everything's got to be done a certain way. So obviously when Cassie and her are kind of working together, they kind of clash a little bit because they think very, very differently. But then, you know, there's a bit of teamwork. It kind of comes in there as well. Again, overall, I actually ended up liking this book a lot more than I thought I would. From the first few chapters, I was like, ugh, I'm not gonna like this. And actually, by the end of it, I enjoyed the plot. I enjoyed what the resolution was. It was actually very interesting. So yeah, I did actually enjoy the book. I gave it 3 stars, but I honestly, when I first started reading it, I was like, ugh, this is a 1 or a 2. Don't like it. But no, I ended up really enjoying it. I got this one as an art copy from NetGalley. And I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. So 3 stars. I don't know if this is a series or not. If it was, I wouldn't continue, but it was actually all right. It was all right in the end. Right, one more kind of crappy book, and then we'll get on to one of the best books I read in December. The best book I read in December. Dead Girl Walking by Roberta Gately. This book was kind of like your sort of crime thriller kind of thing. There's been a shooting, you're trying to figure out who the culprit is, why the shooting took place. There's a copper involved, but the main character is an ER nurse, and it's basically, I was interested in this concept because I'm like, I like all these crime stories, but obviously they're usually done from the perspective of the police person involved, and this is a nurse, so this is different. It didn't work. I didn't enjoy it. I just couldn't figure out why this nurse was butting into this case. It was a horrendous love triangle which added nothing to the story. The character was just meant to be fantastic at everything, and yet some moments of stupidity were awful. Yeah, I gave this a 2. I don't recommend it. I don't enjoy it. It's meant to be the start of a series, and I just, yeah, I won't be reading on. This was not a good one for me. That's the end of bad books. Getting comfy. So, the best book I read in December was Poems for the End of the World by Katie Wismar. This is a poetry collection that came out this year, I believe. It's kind of to do with kind of growing up and growing pains and relationships and illness and all these kinds of things. Mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Loved this book. 5 stars. Would give it 10 stars if I could. Fantastic book. Highly recommend. I am not a poetry person. I've dabbled here and there, but poetry is just not normally my thing. But wow, I really loved this. It really spoke to me. I've recommended it to a bunch of friends. I want to read it again. I said in my best books of 2020, because it featured on there, that I got it as an ebook and I have to get the paperback because I need to own it in a paper form. I loved it. I want to reread it. I want to reread it again already. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. So please give this one a go, even if you're not a poetry person, and have a check out of Katie Wismar's channel if you don't already. She's fantastic. I love watching her vlogs and stuff. She kind of does vlogs about her life and her work and what she's reading and living with her cats and stuff, and it's just, I love her vlogs. They're so like cozy and fun to watch. So fantastic. That, yeah, absolutely fantastic. So give that one a go. Not much I can say about it. It's a short poetry collection, but I cannot stress enough how fantastic this book is. Fantastic. So that is all the books that I read in December of 2020. Fair hefty month. Some diabolical books, dreadful nonsense, and some really great ones too. Pretty good reading month overall, actually. And yeah, that is it. I met my Goodreads goals, as I said. I read the 75 books I wanted to by the end of the year. I've got a couple of other videos coming out where I've mentioned my plans for next year. I'll kind of sum it up in my January TBR, which will come out very soon. I've got some reading challenges and things that I want to start for the next year. So I will catch up with you then. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you again soon. Bye.